regular board meeting of the West Turlock Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Agency Board of Directors. We officially are calling this to order at 6 p.m. Members of the board are participating in tonight's meeting in person from the TID boardroom located at 333 East Canal Drive, Turlock. Members of the public may participate in person or utilize the Zoom's webinar feature or by telephone. Members of the public attending virtually will have the opportunity to provide public comment via the webinar or phone features. For those participating via Zoom, please click the raise hand button on your screen. For those participating via phone, please dial *9 on your keypad. Once your name or other identifying information is called by the board secretary, your line will be unmuted and the public comment period will begin. We do have one slight change to the agenda before we get into the meat of it, and that is there will be no closed session. So items I and J will be essentially removed from the agenda. There won't be any adjournment to closed session and there won't be any report out of closed session. With that, will you stand with me for the flag salute? Ready, salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll of board members, please?
Director Bixel. Alternate Director Casey.
Present.
Director Chiesa.
Here.
Director Espinoza. Alternate Director Lindo.
Here.
Alternate Director Ochoa.
Here.
Alternate Director Santos.
Here.
Vice Chair Jaritsma.
Here. Thank you. Item D, public comment period. Interested persons in the audience are welcome to introduce any topic within the agency's jurisdiction. No action may be undertaken on any item not appearing on the posted agenda, except that the board may briefly respond to the comments, refer the matter to staff, or request that it be placed on a future agenda. At this time, is there anyone present or anyone online or the phone that may have any comments they wish to bring to the group?
We have one member of the public participating online. However, there are no hands raised.
Great, thank you. Then we'll keep this thing rolling. Item E, staff updates, budget update. Mr. Clipper.
Everyone, for period ending April 30th, for the West Turlock account, we had $494,759.83. For the basin account for the same time frame, we had $501,457.56.
Great. Any questions there? No, then we'll let Michael roll into the TAC committee. Oh, wait, different Michael, sorry. Michael Cook for the technical advisory committee update.
Being vice chair, members of the board. Not much to report from your technical advisory committee. We have a meeting, but primarily been busy with budget related matters and get that budget presentation on our annual budget coming up. I can report that since your last meeting in March, we've received 3 applications for new wells. These are all wells, backup irrigation wells for existing growers who have access to surface water, and 1 well that had failed. It was just a direct replacement. So since the program went in place about this time last year with the governor's executive order, total of 74 new wells have been applied for and approved in our GSA, 54 in Stanislaus County and 20 in Merced County, all within the TID service area and all with access to surface water as a main supply. So again, as I mentioned, these are backup wells. And just we're closing out our existing budget we received to fund the programmatic environmental impact report, and just waiting to hear on the other grant application be submitted for kind of a work plan for the next couple of years. So we'll find out more about that later this year and into the fall. So perfect. Any questions for me?
Okay, thank you, Michael. Moving on to the consent calendar. Information concerning the consent calendar items have been included with the agenda packet and will be acted upon by a single roll call vote of the board. There will be no individual discussion on this item unless a member of the board or public has questions concerning the item, at which time it'll be removed for separate consideration by the board. Since we only have the one item on there, any questions regarding that item? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Chiesa, a second by Mr. Santos. I believe it's a roll call vote.
Councilmember, excuse me, Director Bixel? I can't help but look at you and not see council member, so my apologies for that. Alternate Director Casey,
Aye.
Director Chiesa,
Aye.
Director Espinoza, Alternate Director Lindo, Alternate Director Ochoa,
Aye.
Alternate Director Santos.
Yes.
Vice Chair Turitsma.
Aye. Okay, that passes. Item G, agenda items. Number one, GSP second annual report. Ms. Montalbano.
Good evening. As you may recall, Sigma requires that we report annually to the Department of Water Resources on the progress made in implementing the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, or the GSP. And those reports are due at the end of March. And so we have a report from the consultant team that helped prepare that report in conjunction with the Technical Advisory Committee. And so Liz Elliott, who is with Todd Groundwater, led that team in developing the report, and she has information on what is included and what was provided to the department. The report covered the 2022 water year. So that is from October through September. So October 2021 through September 2022. And Liz, if you want to take that away and kind of tell us how all that went.
Sure. Thanks, Debbie, for the introduction. I just want to make sure that you all can see me and hear me clearly.
Very good.
Yes, great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. As Debbie said, my name is Liz Elliott. I work with Todd Groundwater. We were part of the consultant team who developed this annual report, and our teaming partner was Woodard and Curran. As you may remember, they developed the groundwater model for the GSP and also did the update for the first annual report and updated it for this annual report. So next slide, please. Thank you. So as Debbie said, this second annual report is for water year 2022, from October 2021 through September 2022. It includes the first GSP monitoring event, which was conducted in spring 2022. This was the first monitoring event conducted after the GSP was adopted and submitted in January 2022. The annual report includes several things, including a model update for water year 2022, which includes a water budget and change in groundwater and storage. It includes water level analyses, including hydrographs for the representative monitoring wells, or RMWs, as you'll see throughout this presentation, through the spring 2022 monitoring event. It also includes groundwater elevation contour maps for both fall 2021 and spring 2022. In addition, the annual report includes a water quality analysis, subsidence update, and an update on projects and management actions. Next slide, please. So this, as you can see, is a chart of precipitation, and the chart extends from water year 1991, which is the beginning of the GSP study period, through water year 2022. And I'm including it basically to remind you that since the end of the GSP study period in water year 2015, we have had mostly non-wet years, dry, below normal. And the last 2 years, water year 2021 and 2022, have been critically dry. We did have a wet year in 2017 and 2019, but by and large, since the end of the GSP study period, conditions have been pretty dry, as you know. Next slide, please. This is a map of groundwater production in water year 2022. Total groundwater production that was calculated by the groundwater model is about 550,000 acre feet. And this map shows the areas where we've had that, where the highest groundwater production occurred. About 93% of groundwater production during water year 2022 was ag, both agency and private, and the other 7% was urban. And so the areas on this map that are of the brightest colors are the ag areas, especially the areas where surface water is not available in the east. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is the water budget. You've seen this chart before. This starts in water year 1991, and it's been extended through water year 2022 based on this year's model results. And in water year 2022, there was a change in storage, a decline of about 275,000 acre feet. The largest outflow from the subbasin was pumping at about 550,000 acre feet. The largest inflow was deep percolation, about 140,000 feet. Other sources of inflow included canal recharge, gaining from streams, subsurface inflow, and foothill inflow. Next slide, please. This is a map that was in the annual report of the change in groundwater in storage. So this shows the change in groundwater in storage throughout the subbasin. And it shows that there was a decline in groundwater in storage throughout the subbasin. And the total number, as I said earlier, is about 275,000 acre feet decline. By aquifer, we're looking at about approximately 76,000 acre feet in the western upper, 102,000 in the western lower, and about 96,000 in the eastern.
Liz, I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Are you saying that there's less groundwater towards the rivers? Is that how I read the map?
Less groundwater. This is the change in groundwater in storage. And so there is the darker colors are more of a change in storage during water year 2022 than the lighter colors. Does that help?
It does. It seems ironic that you'd have less towards the rivers though.
Yeah, well, there's, what's happening, I think, is that we're getting inflow from the rivers and inflow from other subbasins. In the west, we're seeing darker colors. So this map shows both the change in storage in the west combined from the western upper and western lower. But the colors are a little darker in the west because in the east, the storage losses that have occurred have been partially replenished from subsurface flow that have flowed towards the Kona Depression and also recharge that's been induced from the rivers. So in the east, you've had a storage loss, but then there's been flow towards that cone and replenishment. In the west, there's less of that, which is why the colors are darker.
Doesn't make sense.
That's not.
I'm-
I still don't understand it. But
Yeah. So if there's no pumping, if there's only surface water applied, and that's the San Joaquin River, so that's all in TID's district. So you're saying that there's a net negative 3 feet of storage in some of those areas. And yet surface water was applied?
Both, well, there's surface water. There was a reduced amount of surface water availability during water year 2022. So there was also groundwater pumping in the west. There is also natural flow to the west towards, the San Joaquin River and to the subbasin to the west.
But wouldn't that replenish it?
Right. You think the rivers would kind of flow into the groundwater, right?
Well, there's some replenishment from the San Joaquin River, but the model results show that there was quite a bit of change in storage, especially in the western lower principal aquifer beneath the Corcoran clay in the western subbasin. And we're seeing that also in some of the measured water level data.
The bueno. What is that? Continue on.
Okay, next slide, please. So the spring 2022 monitoring event. So this was the first GSB monitoring event. It was conducted in March of 2022. Groundwater elevations were measured in about 46 representative monitoring wells. Measurements were not able to be made in 2 of the wells. One of them was a USGS well, which at that time the GSA did not have access to, but since then has gotten agreements from USGS and the landowners to get access to that. And in fact, this past monitoring event that was done in fall 2022, water levels were measured in those USGS wells, which was great. And during spring 2022, there was also a well in the east, ETS GSA 12, where the well casing collapsed. And so ETS GSA is looking for a replacement well for that. And so with the water levels that were measured in the spring of 2022, hydrographs were updated, and I'll be showing some of those. Next slide, please. Before I get into the results of the showing you water levels and hydrographs, I just wanted to remind you about the definition of undesirable results. So for the chronic lowering of water levels monitoring networks, an undesirable result for each principal aquifer will occur when at least 1/3 the representative monitoring wells exceed the MT for that principal aquifer in 3 consecutive fall events. For interconnected surface water, an undesirable result will occur on one of the 3 monitored rivers when half of the representative monitoring sites for that river exceed the MT in 2 consecutive fall events. Next slide, please. And so this is a map showing the water levels that were measured in spring 2022 in comparison to the MT. And this is for the western upper principal aquifer. During the spring 2022, about 44% of the wells had water levels that were below the MTs. 9 of the wells were above the MT, and those are shown as green highlighted dots. 7 of the wells were below the MT, those are shown as the red highlighted dots. And two of the wells are Prop 68 monitoring wells that were installed very recently, so we don't have much data, so they don't have MTs yet, and those are shown as the blue dots. Next slide, please. This is a hydrograph from the western upper principal aquifer that's pretty representative of what's happening in the western upper principal aquifer. The spring 2022 water level in this well, and this is TID 106, is above the minimum threshold. But water levels, since the drought, water levels recovered. And since that recovery, they've been declining. And we've seen relatively steep declines in the last couple of years because of the critically dry conditions. Next slide, please. This is a map of the western lower principal aquifer. So in spring 2022, one of the wells in series, the Smyrna Park well, was above the MT. And we had 3 wells that were around the city of Turlock. 2 of the monitoring wells are technically in Turlock. One of them is in Denair that were below the MT. We had 1 well that was not measured. That was the USGS well, which is near the Merced River. And 3 wells do not have an MT yet. Those are the Prop 68 wells, the blue wells. Next slide, please. And this is a hydrograph from one of the monitoring wells around Turlock. This is the Turlock Southwest Water Reservoir. So the spring 2022 water level is below the MT. And what we've seen in this well is a decline in water levels of about 30 feet from spring 2021 to spring 2022. And we're seeing similar trends, declines between 20 and 30 feet in these 3 monitoring wells that are around the cities of Turlock and Denair in the western lower principal aquifer. This map is of the eastern principal aquifer. In spring 2022, 60% of the representative monitoring wells are below the MT, 6 are above, the green dots, 9 are below, the red dots. 1 well was not measured. This is the one whose casing had collapsed. And 2 wells, 2 Prop 68 wells, don't have an MT yet. Next slide, please. And this is a hydrograph from one of the wells in the east, ETS GSA 6. It's located just west of Rouse Lake. You can see water levels are showing that there's a long-term declining trend. In the last few years, just because of the frequency of measurements that have been made, you can see the seasonal fluctuations. But this well, water levels have been below the MT since about June 2020. So we're seeing continually declining water levels with not a lot of recovery or any recovery in the east. And this is the map for the interconnected surface water monitoring network. Along the San Joaquin River, there are 3 wells, all of whom had water levels above the MT in spring 2022. Along the Tuolumne River, there are 3 wells. 2 of the 3 were below the MT. These were both within ETS GSA. to the east and west of Turlock Lake. And along the Merced, 4 out of the 5 were below the MT, and the 4 that were below are within ETS GSA. So what does this all mean? Well, water levels during spring 2022, again, the first event, are below the MTs in more than half of the representative monitoring wells, and they're continuing to decline in response to the ongoing drought conditions. This was the first monitoring event since the GSP was submitted, so projects and management actions will need time to be implemented and for them to have an effect on water levels. There was only 1 well in the monitoring networks with water levels that were possibly at or below IMs, and several are within a few feet. And the reason why that's uncertain is because the well was dry and the IM is slightly below the base of the well. So we're not exactly sure where the water level is. And Todd Groundwater, we're currently developing an action plan regarding how to respond to the exceedances of MTs. So again, just wanted to remind you that the spring 2022 MT exceedances do not count towards triggers for undesirable results, because this requires 3 consecutive fall measurements for the chronic lowering of groundwater monitoring network and 2 consecutive fall measurements for the interconnected surface water monitoring network. So this is the first of 2 groundwater elevation contour maps that I'm going to show you. This is based on measurements collected in fall 2021 in the western upper and eastern principal aquifers. Groundwater elevations range from about 30 feet in the western subbasin to about 144 feet mean sea level just to the east Turlock Lake. Within the center of the pumping depression, the lowest measured water level was about 10 feet below sea level. Flow, as you can see from the arrows that I've added, is towards the pumping depression in both the eastern and the central subbasin. There is northward flow in the vicinity of Ceres and Modesto. And there's a groundwater mound in the vicinity of Hilmar and Delhi that extends north into the area of Turlock and Denair. And in the western subbasin, flow is generally to the west and northwest. Next slide, please. So this is the map for spring 2022, based on measurements that were collected during this first GSP monitoring event. Flow patterns are very similar to the fall. Elevations range from 36 in the west to about 146 in the east, just east of Turlock Lake. Center of the pumping depression, the lowest level was about 14 feet below sea level. Groundwater elevation increased from the fall on average of about a little over a foot. And the eastern principal aquifer saw the biggest increases, an average of about 2.8 feet, and western upper principal aquifer levels were pretty stable. In fact, there was an average decline of 0.3 feet, but again, pretty stable. And we're seeing on this map compared to the previous one that we've got more measured data in the eastern subbasin. That's because this is the first event where we have monitored the full monitoring network. Next slide, please. We've also done a water quality analysis for this annual report. And so the minimum threshold for water quality is a new first-time exceedance of an MCL in a potable supply well in the representative monitoring network. Undesirable results occur if the MT results in a well owner's increase on operational costs and is caused by GSA management activities. This is right from the GSD. In Water Year 2021 annual report, which was the first annual report that we did last year, we developed a baseline monitoring network for water quality. This consisted of 345 wells, and these 345 wells were the wells that were sampled for 1 or more of the 6 constituents of concern during Water Year 2021. And those constituents of concern include arsenic, nitrate, uranium, TDS, 123-TCP, and PCE. And again, these 6 constituents were defined in the GSP. And so last year, when we developed the baseline, we looked at the maximum concentration of these constituents at the wells between 91, the beginning of the GSP study period, to the end of Water Year 2021, which was the end of the study period for the first annual report, in order to develop the baseline. And so this is the monitoring network for this year, Water Year 2022. Of the wells that were sampled in the baseline monitoring network that was set up last year, There were 188 wells that were sampled during water year 2022. And those are shown by the colored dots. This includes about 140 municipal wells, about 30 domestic, and a little over 20 monitoring wells of regulated facilities. Of these wells that were sampled during water year 2022, nitrate was the only constituent of concern with a new first-time MCL exceedance. Next slide. So these are the results for nitrate. Nitrate was measured in about 174 wells during water year 2022. The map on the upper left is our wells that are in the western upper and eastern principal aquifers. Upper right, western lower, and lower left are the western principal aquifers. These are wells we're not sure which aquifer they're in because there's no construction information, or their screen is in both aquifers. And so again, next slide. There are 2 potable water supply wells with reported first-time MCL exceedances, and those are circled, those 2 red dots. We looked at the nitrate concentrations in both of these wells, and we saw very clearly that concentrations have been continually increasing in those 2 wells throughout time, way before the GSP was submitted. We also looked at water levels nearby, and this is a hydrograph from TID 175, which is in the monitoring network and not too far from these wells, and seawater levels have been declining over time, but are above interim milestones in this case. So because, thanks. I just wanted to because concentrations have been increasing before the GSP was submitted and continues to increase, and because water levels are above the IM, these do not appear to be caused by GSA management activities and therefore don't trigger undesirable results. Okay, next slide. So finally, this is the last slide. We did a subsidence analysis, and the subsidence analysis is based on INSAR vertical displacement data. There, the orangey colors show minor negative vertical displacement throughout the subbasin between 0 and 0.1 feet, which is about 1.2 inches. This is consistent with historical rates that we've seen in the past. And it's worth noting that there was a study done comparing INSAR data to GPS data throughout California that showed that the INSAR accuracy is very accurate to within plus or minus 0.12 inches. And 0.12 inches is about 10% of the maximum that you're seeing on this map. And next slide, that is all I've got. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Elliott? Okay. Thank you, Liz. We appreciate it. This item does not require any action. It is presentation only. So if there's nothing else on this one, then we will move on to item 2.
Thank you.
Appointment. Yeah, thank you, Liz. Appreciate it.
Chair, if I may, just on that item, there were some good questions from the board, and it's always tough to do your first annual report in a record 3-year drought, right? When you're trying to manage groundwater levels, and as we saw decline on the western side of the subbasin, but we've already seen significant recovery out there. As you see, the San Joaquin River is very high, had a lot of precipitation and very little pumping out there. In fact, we've had to start turning on our drainage. The TIDs had to start turning on its drainage wells out there because the levels got so high again quickly. So there's been recovery on the west side, not so much the central and eastern sides yet. Hopefully, a year of full irrigation supply like we have planned at TID. And like cut back in and supplemental irrigation pumping should start to see some type of recovery. But again, it's very hard to manage the groundwater in a drought. We just saw that live and well. And just going to the city of Turlock, the reduction there in Turlock probably an influence from the Kona depression moving out from the east side. But again, Turlock and Ceres have committed to a drinking water plan, which will make them less dependent on groundwater, reduce pumping, and you should see some recovery in the aquifer under Turlock and Ceres over time. That's what happened in Modesto when they moved to a surface water supply from MID. So agencies are already implementing projects and management actions to address groundwater issues. It's always bad to start off like this, but I'm optimistic to move forward. And again, a little bit of help from Mother Nature has been a blessing too. So.
And I think that's challenging too, just to sit and try and bring your mind back to the previous water year, when we can look at surrounding communities and see plenty of water standing and sitting around and say, how can this be? But you've got to rewind your brain a little bit to get you there. So, all right, moving on, we will actually ask Mr. Cook to come back up to the microphone for item 2, which is appointment of Technical Advisory Committee Officer Vice Chair. Mr. Cook.
So I regret to inform you, my partner in crime, Karen Morgan from the city of Ceres, has moved on to another position with another agency. It's actually outside of the Subbasin. So she's having to resign her position with the Technical Advisory Committee. So in the past, well, based on your charter, that position is appointed by the board. And as you tack, we're not required to make a recommendation, but we figured it'd be nice for you if we did make a recommendation in case you're interested in what our thoughts were. And so we recommend that Miguel Alvarez from the city of Modesto be appointed to the vice chair position. And Miguel's a wonderful professional, very committed to the work of the GSA, great experience with the city of Modesto, both surface water and groundwater. So we think it'd be a great help to me and the rest of your staff as we work on technical advisory committee stuff. So that was a recommendation from the Technical Advisory Committee, but again, the board is welcome to appoint whoever they would like to.
I will just say before I turn it over to the rest of you guys that it deserves to be on record, the work that Karen has done for this subbasin. She is one of the best and brightest that's tackled the issues here. And it's definitely a loss to us that she's moving on, but I know that wherever she is going to go, she's going to do great things. But I just felt that needed to be said. Karen's a brilliant mind when it comes to water, and she's done great things for this group. So with that, I will entertain any discussion or potentially a motion.
Move forward. Motion to approve. Miguel.
Okay, I've got a motion from Mr. Chiesa, second. I've got a second from Director Lindo. I'm sorry. Whoop, sorry.
Same time. No, we're fine.
Gotcha.
No, you're fine.
Espinoza.
No, you're good.
Any other discussion? Roll call or just a general vote?
I'm happy to do a roll call for you, or you may also do just a voice vote.
Let's do a roll call just to keep it clean.
Okay, very good. So we'll be appointing Miguel Alvarez as the vice chair of the West Turlock Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Agency Technical Advisory Committee for a term of 2 years. Director Bixel. Alternate Director Casey.
Yes.
Director Chiesa.
Yes.
Director Espinoza. Alternate Director Lindo. Alternate Director Ochoa.
Yes.
Alternate Director Santos.
Yes.
Vice Chair Juritzma.
Yes. Perfect. Item 3, fiscal year 2023-2024 operating budget. Mr. Clipper.
Good evening again. So you can read the eye chart there, but this is the West Turlock Subbasin budget, proposed budget. We have our 104,000 in membership dues, and then we have projects that we are collecting contributions for that we've kind of worked between internally with our TAC and with the East Turlock group as well to do these projects. And so then you see that basically spend 600, we're estimating to spend $691,160, leaving us with a reserve of about $2,000. And then moving on, these are the membership dues that we have been collecting for several years now. And then here is kind of a breakdown of the project costs versus the dues and each member agency. And then in the TAC, we have gone over the various projects, individual projects that are comprise this. Any questions?
Michael.
I'll make a move to approve the budget.
I've got a motion by Director Santos.
Did you see the Turlock Irrigation District number? You're still okay? That's good.
Thought we're ahead with inflation.
Is that a second veto? All right, it's been moved and seconded. This is a resolution, so I will take a roll call on this one as well, please.
Vice Chair, if I may, before you take a vote, just one heads up. So we have developed a work program alongside the East Turlock GSA folks, and so we're gonna work on that over the next year, and it may actually expand as we get grant funding. The challenges right now, the East Turlock GSA is having some cash flow challenges. And they are going to start a Proposition 218 process to raise revenue to fully fund their program. But there may be times during this current fiscal year, I just want to be upfront, that they may have a cash flow challenge, which may involve arrangements like, we float that cash flow, or certain programs get removed until funding is available, we can fully fund it. So again, we've developed a program, as Michael said, to work on over the next year. Assuming everything goes forward, but we may have to come back to you and explain why we need to maybe change the budget, change priorities based on the financial situation of our partners in East Turlock GSA.
And one other item, with the grant, the more successful we are with it, it'll prove, more challenging fiscally. So like cash flow, we get all $20 million of it, will be, more challenging.
So I still have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? No? Ms. Lamb?
Director Bixel? Alternate Director Casey?
Yes.
Director Chiesa?
Yes.
Director Espinoza? Alternate Director Lindo? Alternate Director Ochoa?
Yes.
Alternate Director Santos?
Yes.
Vice Chair Juritzma?
Yes. Okay. That wraps up our agenda items. Thank you, Michael. And other Michael. Okay, item H, comments from the board. Any additional comments? Yes, Director Espinoza.
Want to wish all the moms, happy Mother's Day this weekend.
Nice.
Have a good weekend, so. Thank you.
Well done. Well
I
done.
know. You always say to yourself, man, I
Vote
can't-
on that one?
Yeah, I would like to also. He told his mom to watch tonight too, I'm sure. Yeah. Anything else, gentlemen?
Yeah.
A very important mom this season. Yeah. So, all right, with that, we will call this meeting adjourned at 6:37.